Hello and welcome. If you're joining us on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, I'm Scott Feldstein with GrandCare Systems, and we're going to be talking about GrandCare and LADD and the smart home for people with disabilities. So if that's what you've come here for, you are in the right place. And we'll just wait another couple seconds for folks to join. And of course, all of this is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it later and share it with anyone who wasn't able to attend with us. First of all, just let me say welcome. Thank you so much for joining us live today. It was really, really exciting to see how many people registered for this event. That always is exciting to see that. So, and I saw many of you know GrandCare, many of you know me. But there were a lot of new people too that were signing up for this that I don't know, that I'd like to get to know you all. But more on that in a bit. I think we're just going to go right to GrandCare CEO Laura Mitchell.
Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks, Scott, for the introduction. I'm actually really excited today to talk about our project with LADD. LADD, and you're going to be most interested in speaking with Brian Hart from LADD, who's going to talk about the project that they have done with the various technologies. But to begin with, I just want to share a little bit about who we are, and then I'm going to pass the baton over to Brian to share the really interesting part of today's presentation. So GrandCare has been around for 16 years. We are a fully featured remote patient monitoring, social engagement, and telehealth technology platform designed to keep folks independent, engaged, safe, happy, and healthy at home. And for the last 14 years, we had been involved in really making the product available for aging service providers and those who were trying to keep individuals home safely as they aged. Now, about 2 years ago, LADD from Ohio came to us and discussed with us a really interesting project that they had that involved smart homes, congregate group homes that would utilize technology platforms for the intellectual and developmentally disabled population. And that was a kind of a new population for us, although we did have some clients that utilized the technology platform for that hadn't been our core competencies. And so after a period of trying and trials and testing, LADD and GrandCare decided to forge that partnership. And throughout the last 2 years, we have actually created a product that was designed for what LADD needed. And that is a technology designed to keep individuals safe, healthy, and happy and engaged more from the developmental population. What else GrandCare does is obviously we've always done the touchscreen at the center, so it has an engagement tool for individuals to be able to do a HIPAA compliant video chat with family, friends, and providers, play games, see what's on the schedule for today, know when medication reminders were coming up, be able to look at family photos, play radio stations, all sorts of fun, engaging features, but also a place where they could continue to go back to that would help them engage and empower them in their own healthcare. It would remind them to do things, whether it's eat lunch or time to take your medications. Also, here's your today's schedule. Now it could be on a checklist of here's all the things you need to do today to, it's so-and-so's birthday today, or it's time to call Tim, or now here's where you make dinner. There are also activity reminders. Now, this was a particular feature that we built out specifically for not only for dementia, cognitive impairment, but also developmental disabilities. So this would be instructionals, activity reminders, time to do this. Get up first, here's how to make an egg. Here's how to get ready for work. And they would be able to go through the checklist and see what the reminders were in what order. And they could also view video sometimes of themselves doing that task, and it would be audio reminders as well. Of course, we know that medication management and adherence is a huge part of staying independent. for both the aging and the disability population. So that was something that we really focused on as well. And then, of course, there's, and I'm going to let Brian really get into the meat of how they're utilizing it in their particular scenario um, of group housing for folks with disabilities. But GrandCare also does telehealth monitoring, everything from blood pressure, weight, pulse ox, glucose, and body temperature. So it can monitor, track, trend, and record that information, and then send those vitals and reportings and graphs to individuals that are interested in that. So it could be a provider, it could be a family member, it could be themselves, or they could have it and take it along to doctor's appointments to be able to tell if their medications are actually working well. Another component of GrandCare is activity monitoring. And so that is, did someone get out of bed? Did they access the fridge at mealtime? Did they leave the front door open? Is the home at a correct temperature? All of that kind of stuff that'll let you know, is someone sort of safe and engaged and moving around normally at home. So with that, I just kind of wanted to sort of set the stage before we go over to Brian, who's going to really kind of share a little bit more about how LADD has taken all of these robust capabilities of GrandCare and really turned it into a seamless workflow for their staff to be able to better take care of individuals who are living either independently or living independently with other groups in their group home scenarios, which he's going to tell you a little bit about. But with that, let me turn over to Brian, who can share just a little bit about LADD and sort of how you got involved in this project. So Brian?
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today and to talk a little bit about what we're doing at LADD and with our project. So to just give you a little bit of background about who we are. So LADD is a agency that provides services to adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. And we've been around for 46 years. And what led us to, well, today in this project is in the world of the services we provide, and it's not unique to disability services, any kind of care giving home care service, is realizing that the way that services have been delivered for the last few decades, where it's a caregiver model where people just show up and provide whatever service needs to be done, is not sustainable for what's going on. And we knew in looking at the services we were providing that we wanted to be able to provide them to more people. Even though we serve 700 people in our area, we'd like to continue to serve more, but at the amount of money. So in my state in Ohio, we are the second largest expenditure on the state's budget, not us personally, but the whole division, at about $4 billion a year. So it's a lot of money that's going into fund these services. And with that, there's still tens of thousands of people who are not receiving service. So there's all these people that need service, that want service, that desperately could use it. And there's just not enough funding to do it. Now, even if somehow magically we were able to get twice as much money and all these people could be served, we know that because of the staffing crisis that we're in, that's across all sectors of the world right now, but really specifically and hard hit in the service sector and social service sector, that even if we had that twice as much money, there wouldn't be enough people to provide that service. So a few years ago, we stepped back and said, what could we do that's different? How could we provide better service? And at the end of the day too, how do we provide better outcomes and ensure that the people that we're serving are living more meaningful lives, they're more inclusive in their communities, and really meet the mission of meet our mission. And our mission is to, there's a lot of words to it, but the crux of it is to provide opportunities for individuals to be more independent through all aspects of their life. And really that's how we drive this project. And so we thought, how do we look at using technology to stand in for all those areas where we're just waiting for something to happen, or the what if scenarios, technology can provide for a lot of that. And then look at, as we remove individuals in the home, staff in the home, and replace with technology, we use our staff differently. So they're there to provide targeted interventions in the service they provide. And then how do we look at all of these things on an outcome-based model so that everything we're doing provides better outcomes for those that we serve? And so what got us to GrandCare is we are a service provider agency. We are not a tech company. We had no desire to be a startup tech company. We want to just provide good service. And so We looked out and we hired a local tech firm out of Cincinnati to go and look for providers that were doing things similar to what we were doing. Now, first, we wanted to go find a provider that could do all of this in the disability space, and we found almost immediately that didn't exist. So then we thought, okay, well, what's close to disability? Well, aging or mental health is close to disability, and that's where we started really looking. And we did vet a lot of programs, so we think we went through 23 total providers that we vetted through. We narrowed it down to GrandCare, another provider, and then found at the end of the day where we were at 2 years ago, GrandCare really did provide the things that we were looking for to build our service off of. It was kind of our, what I like to say, our platform and our base to build our program off of. And what we had to get to that is really identifying what are the needs of the individuals that we serve. If we're going to say, we're throwing out the idea that staff are just going to stand around and wait for things to happen, but when they are here, they do provide some service. How do we replicate that? And so that's where, you know, GrandCare came in and showed us the package that they had and where they were at the time, and then in conjunction with us, where they were going to go. Now, unfortunately for GrandCare, they didn't know what they were getting into probably when they invited LADD into their home, because the way that LADD has always been and continues to go is a what I like to call a relentless pursuit for what we're looking for. So we were started 46 years ago because we had a couple parents in our area whose kids were getting old enough where they needed to go somewhere, who had a developmental disability, and the only option really was an institutional setting. And they immediately said that wasn't going to happen. And so they founded our company. And ever since then, we have been relentless in ensuring that people live in the community in as small settings as possible, as inclusive as possible. And so that's where we looked at what GrandCare had and their product and said, we're gonna help you build this thing out to really replicate it for the disability service population. Because as closely related as the aging population is, sometimes there are a lot of gaps that still exist. And then taking the idea of how do we go from just supporting one person or a small group to supporting many is really critical. And so that's kind of what got us here today. When we first started, we did look at tons of different technology. We found there were, in a person's life, we worked with OTs from Xavier University. In a person's life, they have about 308 needs that we found we needed to find solutions for through some sort of technology-based need. 174 of those were things that we must have in place. And when we started with GrandCare, they had a huge number of those, and we've helped them to continue to build out more and more of those. So we're grateful for the partnership we have. I apologize for the relentlessness sometimes that we have, because it gets exhausting, the work that we're doing, because we know that we can always be better. And we also know that in terms of social services and types of healthcare, home health services, aging services, if models don't change and embrace technology and change the way they deliver services, they're just not going to exist. There's no magic pill that's going to solve everything else. And so that's why we're really excited about that. And so I think that answered your question, Laura, but there you go.
Well, and that's great. You know, and I think we've talked throughout the years about all of the smart toothbrushes that you've gotten to try out, right? Haven't you had
32? I personally tested 32 smart toothbrushes, and I can tell you on a scale from 0 to 32, which one's the best.
Well, and that's what the great part about LADD is. And so anybody who's watching today who has questions about how to really do this right, LADD is relentless and, you know, always striving for perfection. And, you know, for what that means is that it's never going to be there. I mean, we're always going to be looking for the next thing, always trying to get the best experience. And I think as you tour the house, I was lucky enough to be able to tour it. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we weren't able to tour it as soon as we wanted to. But I was lucky enough to be able to tour it about 6 months ago. And it was just, it is amazingly comfortable, beautiful, and relaxing. And it's not only helpful for the physical needs and mental and cognitive assist, but it also really deals with the emotional necessities and engagement necessities, and really even addressing some concerns that might be agitation or any other types of concerns that could be really helpful for any type of cognitive impairment or anything. I mean, I really looked at some of those rooms. You've got, I'm sure you're going to show the relaxation room, and it was just fantastic. It feels like you're in a spa, you know, right in the home. So it's really exciting what LADD is doing, and I think really setting an example for the rest of the industry in how you can utilize technology to take those man-on-man caregivers and go to zone caregiving. And not only that, but also allow folks to be a little bit more independent and empowered in their own care. And I think that's sort of the joint mission that GrandCare and LADD had, us as a technology provider and LADD as a hands-on service provider.
Yeah, it's very true, because at the end of the day, that's the independence of the individual. That's what we're looking to shoot for. In all these areas where it's going to cost, excessive amount less money if you don't have people in the home, that's great. The way that we can have enough staff to cover people that do have high needs, for all those individuals who living in a technology first way of service delivery isn't going to work for them, we need staff to still provide for them. That's all great. But at the end of the day, our individuals that we're working with that are more independent, that's what it's really all about. And as we are working with Xavier University, their Department of Occupational Therapy, to do a research study that will be published, their publishable research that shows how using technology really does increase a person's independence. You think, and it shouldn't surprise anybody. Just today, I had to go to a part of town I'd never been to before, and I got lost, and I had to use the GPS on my phone, and I would have never been able to find my way out. And so I was able to be more independent. I didn't have to call and have someone drive me somewhere I'd never been, because I have technology. And that's, taking these simple ideas and making them impactful in people's lives is really what we're looking for.
Okay, so before, I know that everyone's anxious to take a tour of the home. And I also want to remind those folks, I see a lot of you on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. If you have any questions at all or comments, please feel free to comment there. We can see them. We will make sure to save plenty of time for questions at the end. And if there's any pertinent questions during it that you want to see, or you want to go dive deeper into what Brian's showing us at the house, please feel free to comment on that, and we'll try to address it. We'll also share our contact information at the end so that you can contact us. And again, like Scott said, this is being recorded and will be played, will be available to you after the presentation as well. So with that, can I just ask Brian, how did you determine, so you guys are obviously way ahead of your time. You decided you wanted to be super innovative. You didn't want to go with just the old school methods of helping somebody to stay independent. You wanted to utilize new technologies, but also it's also, obviously not all about the technology. In fact, I would say it's not really about the technology at all. As long as the technology works, it's all about the process. It's all about making sure that you've got staff that not only know how to engage with it, but actually be able to analyze and make assessments based on that information. So walk us through how you kind of got from the point where you decided to use technology to the focus of putting it into a home.
Yeah, and it's a great point, because we hear a lot, people want to come and see the smart home, which it's awesome, it's beautiful, it's great, and that's a component of it, but that's not all of it. The technology, we want to make sure it goes to the community as well, so people are active in their community. But it also is, how do we staff the model? How do we provide the support service? So right now, the home that I'm standing in, the 4 young men that live in this home, before they moved in, had round-the-clock 24/7 supports. So one was living in a group home, one lived with, two lived with their parents, and one lived in a supervised apartment. And when we decided to make this shift, we realized that just putting technology in doesn't solve for everything, because you can't just put in a bunch of emergency life alert buttons and that will solve all your problems. You need to be able to do the type of service that a staff would do if they were in the home. And so that's how we looked at it and decided, how do we provide the same level of support we would in the home through remote and technology-enabled support means? And that's where we did a lot of work, and we're still working on developing better trainings, webinars for our staff to learn how to train, but teaching them how to use the technology to anticipate the needs of the individual, so that we're not waiting for things to happen. And one cool example we have is imagine you have an individual who has a pretty typical eating disorder that we see sometimes in the IDD field, where, awaken at night and go and eat what's in the fridge, and sometimes eat a lot of what's in the fridge. It's very common in some people's intellectual disability. And so typically how that's handled is we have a staff that sleeps on the couch or is awake in the room waiting for them to go to the fridge, and they prompt them to go back to bed, and then they go back to bed. And so with technology, we could just put a sensor on the door, and when the door opens, someone's alerted through a text or a call, and then they respond. That's one way to do it, but at that point, you've missed your mark. You're not really providing service, you're providing a response. And so what we've done in working with GrandCare is developed a system where we can know that if someone's moving around and gets out of bed, a sensor triggers that. And then if their feet hit the floor, we get a sensor triggering that. And then if their door opens, and the hallway sensor and a proximity sensor in the living room. If all of these things happen, our set of rules that we worked with GrandCare to develop alert the staff, and the staff are trained to say, hey, all these things happen in a sequence, which means Brian is probably on his way to the fridge because it's also 2 a.m. And then what they can do is, rather than wait for the door on the fridge to open, they can pop up on the GrandCare screen that's next to the fridge and have that 2-minute intervention with the individual. And that's what it's really about. It's also within, I'll show you in a minute, our sensory room, our relaxation room. The idea that though anyone living anywhere, including myself and probably everyone listening to this call, gets agitated and needs a chance to calm down and ways to cope with that. And a lot of times how in the service field that we work with is the individual would go and find the staff member who's in the house, and then they would problem solve it out. Well, we're trying to teach people additional coping skills. And so they could either go to our sensory room and use the calm down setting to calm down, or go to their room and calm down. And what we have is, if somebody uses their calm down sensory tools several times in a certain period of time, depending on the individual, the staff are alerted of it, it pops up and lets them know, and they intervene with the individual, thereby saying, hey, Laura, it seems like you're trying to calm down and the tools you have aren't really working. Let's try to find something else. Rather than saying, hey, Laura, it looks like you punched a hole in the wall, or punched your roommate, or,
one time. Okay.
That's all it takes, man. It takes one time. And then, and so we're not waiting for something to happen and then responding. The idea is we're trying to be as anticipatory as possible. And that's, in my mind, what really draws the line between what's just remote monitoring and just waiting for things to happen, and really what is technology-enabled support services. And that's what we're trying to build at LADD, is a whole system that goes, it's not just the tech. Yeah, the tech will do a ton, but how do we use the tech together? And that, again, was another big hurdle, and one that is, anyone that's looked into this knows is the hardest thing, is how do you start connecting these things together? And so that's where, GrandCare has been a real big help of trying to say, okay, how do we take all these different types of sensors and different tools, connect those dots together to allow someone who's not in the room, or maybe monitoring 10 or 15 people, how can we stay ahead of these support services? So we are a little over 1 year into our pilot at this home where 4 guys live, but we've also expanded out, and we have 37 individuals that we're serving total. The only limiting factor of why we're not at 1,000 is because we're metering ourselves to make sure we're doing it in the right way. And also we're building out the rules and the structure around how to do this appropriately. So we're working closely with our state officials and our funding sources to make sure the rules and regulations and guardrails and framework are in place, so that as we move to this new support model, it's done in the right settings, so that we're not in the situation where a screen gets put in, staff go away, and the person never interacts with a real person again. That's not what we're looking for. And so it's that whole encompassing picture of how those things work together. And that's where the idea of being able to predict and be ahead of these supports, that's what drove us to really what GrandCare had when we first were testing things out, about the way they were able to think about this idea of being ahead of the game, being able to just be like a person. If I'm in the room, I'm going to know if people are upset, and I'm going to be able to intervene. I'm going to know these habits are forming and how to get involved and intervene. We want to be able to do the same thing remotely.
Okay, great. And just before we have you start showing the house, somebody just asked if the processes you're describing are customized software, or if it can be actually customized for anyone. If it's dedicated software just for that person, or if you can set up the rules for anyone.
That's what's really cool about it, is everything is for everyone. Everything's customizable. So we know that in what we're doing with people with developmental and intellectual disabilities, everyone's different, but especially when people have support needs, they're all complex, they're all different. And so how we look at it is, we have an assessment tool that we've developed with occupational therapists and team of professionals in our field to determine what type of technology would be appropriate based on person's needs, what's important to them, what's important for them. And then we look at, once we have identified the technology, how do we build the rule structure around them? And so for some individuals, we have all these rules set up for things that happen at night. But for other people, once their head hits the pillow, they're out. If you were to provide service to me, I promise you, once I'm asleep, I'm out. I'm not going anywhere, I'm not doing anything. Like, you may have to like put something on to make sure that I'm still alive throughout the night, because I don't even flinch. And so the set of rules that's required for me would be much different than somebody else. And that's And that's how we look at it. It's based, we start with the individual. And we could have very easily come out and said, here's the tech package, everyone has to fit into that. But that's not what we're looking for. We found the technology, we made it work for the individuals, and our menu of technologies that we have available, GrandCare being, again, the platform we started off of, is pretty immense. So depending on what a person's needs are, it may be that they have a wearable, like a watch and a phone and all the technology in their house and all these supports. Or for some people, it's as simple as we have one GrandCare screen, a door sensor, and a shoe insert that has a chip in it. It really is, the complexity depends on the individual.
Awesome. So we're ready for you to take us around. You're at a house and you're in Cincinnati. Is that where we are?
We are. So I'm gonna, hold on. This is gonna be a little awkward for 1 second. So feel free, if you get motion sick, to close your eyes for about 10 seconds while I flip the camera around and make it so that we can actually see what's going on. Okay. So yeah, so we are in the home, and we are in a suburb of Cincinnati called Anderson Township. And the model and what you're seeing right here is our GrandCare screen. And this is the one that's in the main living room. And how we've used the GrandCare screens is we have them all throughout the house. So it's not one screen for one person. There's one here. That's our main community screen. You can see that one that says Gardening Club next to the Alexa device. That's another GrandCare screen. What that is that really solves for our kitchen needs. So we have a lot of kitchen needs. And when you're cooking in the kitchen, the way that the camera is set up on the screen, this one over here didn't really capture everything we needed in the kitchen. And so we talked with GrandCare and said, well, what could do differently? And they said, well, what about a screen that isn't attached to the wall, that could be anywhere? And so if you're cooking a meal or needing assistance in the kitchen, you can just go ahead and grab that screen and you can take it anywhere. And the cool thing about it is, even if it's unplugged, it still lasts for a couple hours. One of the things that, when we were testing technology, like I said, we tested it about as far as we could go. And those things last pretty long, and they're really durable. We try to break everything we possibly can. And that's what's been really cool about what we're doing with all of these different areas of technology. You can see up here on the ceiling in the corner, there's a sensor up there in the corner. They're all throughout the house, and really these sensors are what gives us the whole package. So it's not just a screen that's on a wall. The idea is that screen works with all the different types of rules and sensors we have set up to create the support platform. So I'm just gonna give you a view of the house, and then we'll talk about the things that we have. Now, what I want you to take notice of this house, though, as we're going through, is to take a look at it and think, does this look like the typical house that we have for disability services? And the answer is probably no. And what we found is that when we're doing what we call our Forever Home project, we make sure the houses that we have are built so that anyone would want to live here. That just because people live here that are receiving services or maybe are low income or affordable housing, it should still look like a house everyone else wants to live in. So this is the LADD standard of house. This is what you'd see everywhere where you go. And as we go through, break your mindset of what is low income affordable housing, because this is what you're looking at here. So some of the things that we have in the main living area of the house is we have obviously the kitchen over here, but as you walk through the door, the way we have some of the home automation set up in the technology set up in the house is if it's nighttime and you walk in the house and there's no lights on, the lights turn on. When you leave the house, when you arm the security system, everything shuts off. So that way you're not leaving the stove on, leaving the iron on, things like that. But then also the support system knows when somebody's come into the house, so that when somebody comes in, it's alerted through sensors and staff can reach out. And so from these screens, like I said, they're here, they're kind of everywhere. The staff can reach out and they can say, hey, how's it going? Welcome home. Do you need assistance with anything? They can do those check-ins. Now, another awesome feature that we have in the house in the kitchen is some of our smart appliances and how we use them to provide support. And one of the things that we found in looking at what devices should we use is how do we take technology that is more or less something you can get off the shelf, that isn't proprietary, that's not hard to function, and use it in a different way. And so this is where our smart refrigerator comes in. And as you see on top of the refrigerator, there is a sensor up there, and that's tied in with our GrandCare system. But then as we use the smart refrigerator, it allows us to take the idea of just providing support and take it to the next level. So there's different apps that are part of this refrigerator. So this is one they like to use called Whisk. And this allows for meal planning. It allows for, once they've planned their meals, it suggests recipes for the meal. It will collect the grocery items that are needed. It'll send them to the grocery store. and then they can have the groceries either ready for pickup or delivered. You think about all of those tasks and how typically we just have staff provide them. But now the guys that live here, and all of our homes have these smart refrigerators, they can do that independently. And then what it does, it allows them to be more independent, but it saves on the staff time. What's also cool about it is you can look inside the fridge. So no matter where our individuals are at, the staff are at, this is a visual, this is a representation here to see what it is, but our staff remotely can also look at this as well. So as they're monitoring the systems that are pushed through GrandCare, they're also able to look in and say, hey, we're doing food prep with this individual using the GrandCare system. Let's pop it on the screen of the fridge and see what's actually inside. And you can see it lists all the different things that are in there. And it helps them plan for their meals, helps them know what's there. It also helps when you're moving out for the first time and mom's worried you're not gonna have any food. The staff can take a snapshot of that and send that to mom and she knows there's food. Or if you have an aging parent, it's the same thing. It's not just for children with disabilities. And then what they do is once those things are done, then it becomes time to meal prep and cook the meal. And typically, again, that's where staff come in. They would cook the meals, they would prepare them. But with the use of our technology with GrandCare, the staff would pop up on this screen, or the individual would make a video call. So let's say it's time to cook. I'm gonna pop a video call. Me and Hannah are planning on cooking a meal. I would call Hannah. She would pop up on the screen and we could cook a meal together. As I get more and more independent, the idea is that I would use that option less and less. And it would turn from I'm calling Hannah every time I want to cook a meal to I call Hannah whenever it's time to cook a meal, whenever I have a question or I just need something. And so that's what's really cool. And that's how we've used this technology. Some other cool features that we have are a smart stove and oven. We use an induction cooktop. That way people have a really hard time getting burned. You can turn this thing on all day, but once you put the right type of pan on there, it won't burn you. So allowing people who have never cooked before to be able to prepare their own meals. The other areas that we're looking at when I talk about pushing the envelope of innovation is we partnered with Stanley Black & Decker Health to build out their medication dispensing devices and working with GrandCare and them to see how do we connect that dot as well. So looking at this device, which can help with medication administration, it can do remote medication management, it gives alerts if someone missed a medication, those kind of things. And so building these connections as well, where Stanley Black & Decker Health didn't even understand that the disability population needed something different. And then letting them understand that if we could connect what they have with the other supports we have, the bigger picture we can have for all the services we have, all the people that we're serving as well. So that's another cool piece that we have there. And I want to show you how we use the screens differently as we go through. So this is, like I said, our main community screen. Now, one of the things that you can see, it has a call staff button. So if somebody needs something, they can hit that button, and regardless of who's on call or who's working right now, they would just respond back. If they want to talk to someone specifically, they can again hit that video call button, hit someone specifically. But then this also is our community board. So it gives us the ideas for, like the calendar for the house. Shows all the different things that are specific for the whole house, or it will give, the schedule for the whole house. So like today, it looks like it's Daniel and Matt's turn to do dishes. So they would have that there as well. And as we go throughout the house, you'll see the screens have different levels of what they do. So the next area I want to show you is the bathroom. So we'll take a quick walk over there. And again, in this amount of time, there's no way to go through all the technology, but just know that there's hundreds of it there. So here in the bathroom, you can see there's a different type, there's a GrandCare screen, but this is a little different. So this one is more specific to the two guys that live on this side of the house that share a bathroom. And I asked them specifically to leave a reminder up so you could see it. So Daniel has a reminder that he's supposed to be taking a shower, so he can check that thing off when it's done and then it goes away. But you'll also see they have different reminders in here based on where they're at. And that allows them to get things like scheduling on lists of tasks of what to do. So I need to shower and brush my teeth and shave and all those things. What it also does is it allows for staff to assist as needed in the restroom. Now, what's different about this is we have protocols built around so that someone can't just video call in the bathroom. So we have it set up where they have to do an audio call or a text through that so they can still provide that support. But other things we have in here, so we have our smart scales, and we have a pretty robust health and wellness system at LADD, and using health devices like a smart scale, blood pressure cuff, pulse oximetry, temperature, all of these different things help us know how is the health of the individual working, and is it getting better? Are we getting better outcomes? If not, how do we intervene to get better outcomes and to maintain their overall health and safety? Another thing we have, which is a little different than the screen, is these emergency call buttons. And what's different about that is if you use a screen and push to call staff, that's more of a, I need assistance with something, I need help. And these are really set up where it really is a true emergency. So this is when I talk about your glorified life alert, that's probably more closely related to anything else we have that's that. We also, like Laura said, the smart toothbrushes. So you can see that's the one. Everyone asks which smart toothbrush I like the best. The Oral-B 10,000X that we oddly enough got at Target is the best one that we found because it allows us to track toothbrushing, which teeth is actually being brushed, but also how well and how often. And then we use that data to help us define what level of service we provide. So if they don't need any help or don't need any support, then we just keep monitoring. But if we find that all of a sudden someone's not brushing half of their teeth, we can bring a dental assistant in to teach them how to fix that area. Again, knowing that anytime a staff member comes in to provide support now, they're not just waiting for things to happen, they're providing targeted value add supports. You can also see there's motion sensors here in the bathroom that help us out, door sensors, and what that allows us to do, there's some in here as well in the hallway, allows us to provide that higher level of support. So at night, if somebody's in their bedroom and they get out of their room, staff would know, oh, they went to the bathroom and went back to bed. So there's probably no need to intervene. But let's say they get out of bed and they leave their room and they're just wandering in the living room. They would probably want to reach out and say, hey, is everything okay? It's the middle of the night and you seem to just be wandering around. So this area here, because when we built this house, it had plans for a sunroom, we decided to do a sensory room or a calm down or relaxation room. And what this allows us to do is this gives us a space where the individuals that are living here can try different sensory technologies and use different sensory technologies to either calm down, or if they're feeling depressed, to amp up. I guess the opposite of calm down, feel excited. And what that does is it's not just in the moment, but that data is shared with us, and we can collect this data the same way any other alert from GrandCare comes through, and the staff use that data to make decisions on how they intervene. And so let's say that I'm coming into this room, I can either do a voice command, which I'm not going to try to do because I don't have all the voice commands memorized, but instead I can just use this. I can push a button, I hit calm. And for Dan, who that setting we use, he likes it dark. He likes the color blue. He likes this music. And he can just come in and relax. Let's say that that's not working. He can try a different setting. Let's say today, I'd rather have the color red. He can go grab a different color purple, I guess, not red. There's also, you guys can't see it, and you can't hear it, but there's also aromatherapy that would come on with different people's settings. There's also different textures. There's other things that come on, and it's individualized for the person that's in here. Now, what's really cool about this is it's not just for the guys living in this house. And we know that not everybody could put this in their home. Not everybody has the space for it. Not everybody has a separate room they could do. But when you look around, you can see all of these different technologies could easily be put somewhere else. Nothing is hardwired into the home. Everything's put in after we did the home. And so what individuals can do is they can come in here, they can try out different technologies, see what works for them, and then whatever works, we can put in their house and we can move it there. And what's also cool about it, when we built this house, our methodology is we decided to build the house first and then install the technology. And that was really important to us. And a big thing about GrandCare that worked with us on is we want to make sure that when we scale this out to other houses, we don't have to tear out walls, we don't have to move electrical, we don't have to go back to the studs. You know, what we like to say all the time and joke around that it's a lot of batteries, a lot of double-sided tape, and a lot of Wi-Fi. And that's what helps us keep this thing running. And so that's a little, I want to show you one more room that I think is just really cool. So in terms of all these different technologies, we have things like smart washers and dryers that alert the individual when their clothes are done so they can move them across. It also alerts staff if no one's done their laundry. This is the garage. Since the four of them don't drive, we decided to put in a man cave. So we have a door down there that will take you into the 4-foot garage we have that holds our trash cans. But all of this technology, again, like I said, the GrandCare screen that's in there provides support. So no matter where the guys are in the home, they can still receive the support that they need. And this is a representation of what we have in this home. But again, like I said, we're expanding constantly, and it's very similar in all the other areas that we're at as well. So that's a little quick tour of our home, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I want to give some time for questions, so I will stop there.
Awesome. That is so great. And I will say, every time you show that, it just gives me chills because it's so, it's such a beautiful home and anybody would want to live there. I would feel like very lucky to live there. And I assume that your residents also feel pretty lucky to be in such a beautiful and high-tech home.
They really like it. They really enjoy it. And they talk about, you know, things that are different than what we would like. Like, I think it would just be fun to have all this technology. I'm probably lazy. So it would be fun to be able to say, Alexa, turn off all the living room lights. Like, that's awesome. Like, all the lights are going to go off. I don't have to go and touch anything. They can just go off. But when they talk about the guys that are living here, they express the idea of they are more independent. They're responsible for their own things. If they're not using the smart refrigerator to order groceries, they're out of food. If they're not using their GrandCare systems to keep track of their schedule, connect with their staff, they're going to miss appointments. They're going to miss activities. They're going to, you know, the screen alerts us when they need a medication. They're going to miss a medication. And so they really feel a sense of ownership and independence for the services they receive as well.
Awesome. So we have a bunch of questions coming in here. First and foremost, did the residents learn easily to use those monitors?
Yeah, and I would say out of all the technology, that was an easy one to use. And I know that that's probably decades of R&D that GrandCare did into them, but it is very easy to use, and they use them a lot. And what we did, and this is if I was giving advice to anyone, and I get asked a lot for advice, so I'm going to go ahead and give it. When you're making this shift, so if it be someone that you're serving in a disability setting, in a group setting, and you know, our largest group that we serve is 6, where, you know, we believe that 4 or smaller is the best setting for the services like this. But even if it's an individual on their own or someone that's aging, is put the technology in when they already have the other supports. Don't wait until you're in an emergency and you no longer have staff, and technology is a way you can fill that gap. So when we move anyone to a technology-based support service, we have them install the technology and use them at the same time to make sure they learn it, they understand it, they use it, and then we remove the staff out. But the screens are easy to use. I mean, I have one still in my house, and me and the other staff use them to connect sometimes on them. It's great.
Okay, here's another question. How did you select the right residents to be in the smart home together?
Yeah, great question. So for our pilot, for the first 4, we looked at how could we find 4 individuals who were interested in embarking on this almost experiment that we had of, could this even work? There was no data that building a smart home like this really actually worked. A lot of the smart homes that exist didn't have people living in them, or they weren't going the full breadth of technology and replacement of staffing like we like. So first of all, it was finding people that were interested, finding the right families who were going to be supported, because that's a big part of it when you're serving someone who has a parent who's still around with us. But then also we wanted to make sure that we could, through our pilot, get the widest array of disabilities we could solve for. So 2 of our residents have Down syndrome, 1 has autism, 1 has cerebral palsy. One has a vision impairment, 1 has a hearing impairment, 1 has a verbal impairment. We wanted to get the widest array of disability we could without going so far as into, we're not going to get any information because all we're doing is solving for really complex needs. And so that's how we found these 4 guys. As we go through and look at the rest of our population. So like I said, we serve about 700 individuals. We've done an assessment of all of our individuals we serve, and 20% of our population is really just low-hanging fruit. The only reason we haven't switched them over is just because we're doing it at a metered pace as part of our research study. I think the students at Xavier would like us to continue at a very more metered pace, but we're pushing their limits. And we think in our population, we're probably 45% of our population would be a good match for this type of service. And then the others, it's not a matter of they can't use any technology, but maybe some technology here and there. And, you know, it's been really exciting to see what people can do. We have people who have never used technology. We have some who have never even used a smartphone. They had a flip phone, and that was the most technology thing they had. And the way they picked it up and adapted to it has been astounding.
All right, we have another question here from Teleboomer. Would the home automation oriented routine still work if the internet service went down? So talk about internet service and power. Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah.
I know
so you guys, yeah, no, you caught me today. So Monday, that was yesterday, right? So yesterday we had a bunch of school-age children or transition-age high school kids, so 18 to 22-year-olds, who were coming to see what what it looks like to move out on your own. And we were having crazy storms, and we lost power 4 times while they were here in an hour. And so we have, the GrandCare systems obviously have battery backups in them. All the other sensors are battery powered, so power is not really an issue. We do have generators, so if it goes out, it does switch over, so extended periods of time we'd be covered. But then for internet, we have everything on typical internet, and then we have backup. Now in this home, because it is our incubator home, it's our model test home for everything, we have fiber, cable, DSL, and 5G internet. So they would work their way through everything if we ever had to. At the end of the day, though, if something completely goes out, that's where typical supports would come in. And so we have had incidences where we have a complete blackout, where we have no internet or the system completely goes down, and we would just institute typical supports. It's typically rare. They're very few and far between. We are required by rule to have somebody who their only job is to wait for a phone call in case all the systems go down and somebody has a non-emergency need. We've had to use that person 4 times in a year. And it's not just one person, because of course it's around the clock. So it's actually 3 people, 4 times an entire year, because the internet doesn't go down as often as you think it would, especially if you have a backup system. And that's really what I would say, is have your typical internet and have some sort of backup just to catch it when it goes out, if it goes out.
Awesome. So a couple more questions revolving staff training. So I'm gonna try to group together these questions. How do you train your staff? How long does it take to train staff? And talk about how you get staff ready. And there's also one is whether staff need to be in the home or they can be remote. So talk a little bit about your staffing.
Yeah, so all of our staff that provide the remote monitoring and the tech-enabled support, they are working from their own home. So none of them are here. In the beginning, in the basement of this house, it's an unfinished basement. We put in an office, and we thought, oh, it'll be perfect. We'll have our remote monitoring center down there. The pandemic hit, and having people come in, just not going to happen. So we had everyone work from home, and we found it works out great, because it turns out if you have an internet connection, you can do this from almost anywhere. So that's where the staff provide that service. So right now, whoever's monitoring, Tanisha is the person that's on staff right now. If I were to put that call staff button, I would see her living room or her home office, whatever. In terms of training, so that was something that we had to really change the way that we train the people that work for us. So it's not just about training the residents on how to use the technology differently or how to support them and be supported, but how do we train the staff differently? Because they're so used to, I show up from here to here and just whatever happens, I'll deal with. And really it's a matter of now, if you're going to be working from here to here, but you're watching for things, you're watching technology, you're watching different settings. So one person is watching 30 people all in different settings, and how do we support that? So we developed some training guides. We worked with some technical writers, some training experts in our own internal training team to develop training guides. So we have training manuals that we work people through. We're kind of building upon that after we've done it for a year and figured out what works and what doesn't work. But it's not, I would say, more intensive than the in-person training that we have as well. It takes about the same amount of time. When we bring someone on, they shadow for a little while, they're paired up with someone for a little while, and then they're on their own, knowing that they have someone there to support and help them. At the end of the day, it's harder for us to teach them how to use and navigate the different systems they have, because we still haven't connected all the dots of all the technology, than it is to provide the remote support. And one of the things that we are doing, I should mention, is we are developing what we're calling a toolkit, basically, so that as we've gone through this pilot and we've seen that it's a lot of work and a lot of time to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So we've worked with Xavier University to develop a toolkit that should be ready in about probably less than 6 months at this point. We say a year, and we've sped that up, where we'll have training guides, technical assessments that you could use, technical specifications of what you could use, because LADD, we provide service in Cincinnati. We love it here. We're only going to provide service here, but this is a system that has a way of delivering a service that needs to be everywhere. So our next role is to just be the one that comes in and says, here's how you do it. Here's your box, take it out, open it, use it. We're here to help you if you need it. But given the legwork that we've done over the last 2 years, and GrandCare can attest the amount of legwork, nobody else should have to go through that. Like, we've gone through it and did it. GrandCare shouldn't have to deal with another LADD. We shouldn't have to try to figure out all these technologies. That's really the benefit of being a nonprofit and a community provider, is being able to share what we've learned with other people as well.
Actually, and that goes really well into the next question. Is there an inventory available so we would have some ideas of what to put into a similar home for our developmentally disabled or elderly residents? And that's kind of what you were just
There
talking about
is.
with that toolkit.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is, and we have 400 different tech pieces that we've looked at. And what's cool, what's important about it too, is not what works, but also a list of things that don't work. So here's the list of things that, we spent $300,000 on these technology pieces that just don't do anything. And so they might work in a novelty sense, but they don't help provide support. So here's the ones to stay away from, and here's the ones to use. And I'm sure that we'll share my email. If you're interested, reach out to me. I can help get you started, because that's the question we get asked a lot. If you haven't already asked it, I'm going to ask it for myself and then answer it, is how do I start? And that's what we thought of. How do you start? And I would say how to start now is start planning for it, start preparing for it. The best time to start was probably yesterday. Second best is today. Third best is tomorrow. Start having those conversations with the people you're working with about how do we use technology, and start small. Does it start with just putting GrandCare screens in a room and then adding sensors in and then adding all the devices? Or is it that you want to embark on a huge pilot and make a system change? Start where you can and build off of where you're at. But feel free to reach out to me. I know we'll share my email and I can share information with you. And then once we have the full toolkit, I can share that as well.
Yep, and I should be sharing my screen in just a second here, which will share email and contact information for GrandCare and LADD. I think I'm going to keep going to questions until we're out of time. I do have a question about how the residents' families engage with it. Do they get involved in the monitoring, or do they just do chatting with the residents? How did they react to the technology?
Yeah, so we do not have family providing monitoring. As the service provider agency, we provide all the monitoring. How the families interact, though, is on the screens that are in the individuals' bedrooms, they are able to video call with anyone that they want to set up that has the GrandCare app on their phone. So they connect. I know a couple individuals call their parents every day on it. Some do morning routine calls with them. Some do just check-ins with them. And so that's how they still stay connected. The parents can also suggest things to be put on the screen, alerts, reminders, things like that. But then also, how did they react is, that's always the hard part. As a parent, you're always left thinking, well, I'm worried about what could potentially go wrong. And so our job as the provider is to curb those fears. And so even for the first 2 weeks of the smart home, everyone was worried that overnight something horrible would happen. So they had me sleep on the couch for the first 2 weeks. And guess what? I slept through almost every single thing that happened. And so each morning I would get up, I would call the remote support staff, and they would give me a big old download of everything I slept through, from people going on a walk outside to going to the fridge to two remotes getting up and sitting on a chair across the couch and just hanging out. They didn't wake me. Let me sleep through all of it. And it shows, that's how we get buy-in from parents, is showing that it works, and knowing that the supports, when we remove the staff physically are not there anymore, but the remote staff are there all the time. So really, you're getting more level of support, because the technology acts as multiple layers of support. And then there's always somebody there monitoring to provide assistance as needed.
Okay, and then here's a question on the ROI, which also ties into what you were just talking about. And it reminds me of when I was in Ohio and you were telling me about how you did some sort of test on the technology versus human intervention. And you found that the technology actually, it's kind of like when you were on the couch and the technology doesn't fall asleep and it tracks everything. So regardless of whatever's happening, the technology will let you know what actually did occur, and it doesn't rely on a human to understand that. So talk a little bit about what you've come up with, the efficacy of the technology, as well as what the ROI has been. And I don't know how you want to address that from a caregiver standpoint or.
Yeah, so in terms of the efficacy, we are still collecting all of the data on how does it correlate with the in-person support. We know that it captures more. We know that we're giving people more independence. The Xavier study is giving us that information. We're still analyzing that data. We did a project with Prudential to look at the data that we collect. And one of the data scientists said, I deal with a lot of data, but this is like a lot of data. And how do we decide what's useful, what's not? Because we're receiving it. I mean, probably me walking around this house gave us 1,000 points of data. and how useful is it, all those kind of things. In terms of the ROI, we did some work. So our state treasurer came down and met with us, and because he's the state treasurer, they're math guys, right? So he wanted to do math while he was here because they just can't avoid doing math for an hour, I guess. And we calculated that if 20% of the people served in Ohio under disability services were to replace their in-person caregiving with technology for even 1 hour a week, that equals $1 million a year in savings to the state of Ohio. And you think about that's 1 hour for 20%. And if we replace 2 hours, or in a home like this, we've replaced over 100 hours a week. You think about exponentially how much savings that is towards the system, so we can provide for more people. We can pay people more. We're able to pay our staff a living wage, and working closer and closer to getting to that for across the board. But for the staff that are doing our interventions, we're able to pay them a living wage because we're not inefficient with just sitting around. In terms of the different pieces of devices, we did an ROI test on the smart fridge and found that its ROI is 10 weeks. We are in the middle of doing the ROI study on the GrandCare Systems with Xavier because they're taking it piece by piece. But we know that all of these different pieces of technology not only have a good ROI, so it makes it so if you're a service provider and you receive a daily rate, anywhere you be more efficient is beneficial. And so that's what's huge about it, is it's almost all low-hanging fruit at this point because no one in our field has been doing it.
Okay, I have time for maybe one or two more questions, so I'm just going to kind of come through some of these. Let me see. Okay, here's one. How technology savvy do the caregivers need to be?
One of our remote support monitoring people who really wanted to do this, she had never downloaded an app before on her phone, and now she provides remote support services. Some are very technology savvy and they give us a lot of clue. It really depends on the individual's preference to learn. We also have people who have no desire to provide that type of service, and thankfully 50 to 60% of our population will never switch to this model, so they can stay with that old model. And so it's not just about individualizing the service for the person receiving it, but also the person providing it.
Okay, and I'm going to allow for maybe one more question here. Okay, here, let's do this one. Were the residents afraid of living alone, and how did you address the change?
Yeah, so they were. Yeah, I mean, they were not only afraid of being alone, but living in a new town, potentially some of them, a new setting. And that's where the being able to have the support at the push of a button comes in extremely handy. If you're feeling alone, if you're worried or scared, you hit one button, it says call staff, and the staff are there. I mean, that's life-changing for someone who's normally living alone, and maybe they have to decide, who am I going to call? Are they available? What if they don't answer? With the GrandCare system, they can push a button and the staff are there. So that's how we worked on that. We also did a lot of work before they moved on getting to know their community, getting to know their roommates. So that was helpful. But we do have individuals that do live alone, and they moved out and lived alone for the first time. And being able to use the GrandCare and other tech to connect with whoever is in their world is hugely beneficial.
Okay. And so how do they get started? I mean, you know, obviously people can contact GrandCare to get more information on the technology of GrandCare, but LADD is so much beyond that. I mean, it's really not just about GrandCare or the other technologies. It's about the process. It's about the workflow. It's about the how. So how do they get started on this, and how do they learn more?
So I would say if you want to learn more, please reach out. You can go to our website, which is laddinc.org, laddinc.org. You can check it out there. You can email me. You can also reach out and we can connect. Or I would say, where do you start? Again, talk with your team, talk with the people you support, talk with everyone you have, and explain to them that, hey, this is something we're thinking about. Start talking to your parents that you work with about, hey, this is a model we'd like to look at. Start talking to your funding and regulatory sources like, hey, I want to look into this. A lot of states now with the ARPA funds that came down from for the pandemic, technology is a big piece of that. And so there's going to be more and more of this coming down. The idea that technology was used as a novelty is gone. It now is technology first is where it should be. So reach out to us, reach out to GrandCare. We can help you from there.
Awesome. Scott, do you have anything more to say? We're just at the top of the hour and I want to make sure that we don't keep, I
Yeah.
know everybody, especially Brian's got a million
Yeah.
demonstrations that he has to give every day. So I appreciate you spending this time with us, Brian.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thanks
much.
everybody. So as we conclude, I just wanted to say that while we've spent the last hour recognizing the innovation and the thought leadership at LADD and the technical prowess of GrandCare, I just wanted to take a minute to also recognize the 4 men who live in that house. They decided to take a chance. They took a risk. They tried to do something that they had never been able to do before. And their success is an inspiration to us all. So thanks for joining us all today.
Thank you, everybody. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions. Thanks.